just allow yourself to follow your feelings.
So just kind of some sadness comes up.
Mm-hmm. So what's the flavor of that? What does it feel like? What does it remind you of?
Missing out on something. Or some lost opportunity.
Okay.
Maybe like a holding back on my end.
Okay.
Out of fear, but also maybe out of other things like selfishness.
Mm-hmm. Consider what a positive reason might be.
Protection.
Pardon?
Protection.
Okay. Because usually these are mixtures. There's selfishness, there's fear, there's protection. What else could be there?
Trying to balance someone else out.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. I wonder if you might pull your computer a little closer.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was thinking maybe trying to establish balance.
Okay.
Balancing out someone else's energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean by that.
I like that one. And I'll tell you why. Sometimes we are responding appropriately to a situation. We just don't understand the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in that particular case, without sensing consciously that there's an out of balance situation, we find ourselves doing what you described, balancing somebody else's energy so that the whole
Mm-hmm.
feels better to us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. But it also creates a little bit of anger when you're like, hey, I'm having to balance everyone else out here, and I don't get to sort of enjoy or let myself get too excited or, out of control like everyone else is.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's some resentment there.
Mm-hmm. So in a teasing way,
Mhm.
have you talked about this openly so that somebody can help address it?
No?
Oh, well then. So what I'm teasing about is that until we name it, naturally we haven't asked for support. And then there's a little bit of a longer learning curve there, where the other person may not have as strong an awareness as you have
Mhm.
of this balance.
Sometimes when I hint at it or address it, it feels like the other person just disregards it as my own problems. Well, that's your problem.
Mm-hmm. In the most positive light possible. What would engage them?
Being just as excited about every little thing that they were, and other things.
Okay.
Something that maybe would interest me. But I tend to put all that on the back burner.
Mm.
And then once you put something on the back burner for so long, it's really hard to go back and get it.
Mm-hmm. So again, in the most positive light, if you bring it forward, how could you make it exciting for them too?
I don't think I would have to. I think just by getting excited about inviting someone to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somehow tying it into what they're interested in also.
Mm-hmm. So where would the resistance be? Would it be bringing it forward?
Um, well, that's very tricky. That's very, well, if it was brought forward, then what? Then there's a little fear of having to go with it and put some other things that make me feel more safe and more comfortable on hold. So it's sort of going out of my comfort zone. And it would mean letting go of resentment, and it would mean letting everyone around me know, hey, you're doing a great job.
Say a little bit more about that. Letting everyone around you know they're doing a great job.
Like if I got really excited about something or really chilled out or didn't worry about stuff, or it would, I feel like, and this is so selfish and I don't do it consciously, but when I start thinking about more deeply what I'm doing, I realized that me being happy or relaxed or all of these positive things sends a message to other people that they're doing everything right towards me.
Okay.
And I think that is coming from when I was a child with my mom,
Mm-hmm.
and also in my relationship. You know, because if I was a child and I was happy or excited, well, there went mom's attention. You know, there's, oh, fine, you're doing good, I'm doing good. You don't need anything else from me,
Mm-hmm.
which wasn't true growing up and isn't true now. Because just because I'm happy doesn't mean I don't need this other person to still meet my needs.
What would happen if you were happy and relaxed and the other person said, great, and they got happy and relaxed, and you grabbed them by the collar and said, I still need you?
That would work pretty well because the other person would feel loved and supported and all of the things that they need, which would put them in a place to help me more also.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were a child, that reaching out and grabbing someone, that's an act of confidence. It's an act of someone who knows their peer position. And you didn't have that as a child. Do you know what I mean? In other words, as an adult to another adult, you can turn to them and say, please pass me that. But as a child, you say, can I have that, please?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't ask for the other person to meet you halfway as a child. But you do now.
Mm-hmm.
You can now. So what we go through in these little tiny untanglings is a place where an old childhood habit is still active
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't really match the current situation.
Mm-hmm. Right, because now that I'm an adult, I have the intelligence and the resources
Mm-hmm.
to ask for when I need help.
Mm-hmm. And this is also your partner, not your teacher or parent or... So I'm using the phrase peer because when you're a child, your peer is another incompetent kid.
Mm-hmm.
So see if you can go over that small scenario in your head or out loud, either way. One more time. Kind of walk through it.
Which part exactly?
Well, here's what I'm suggesting. We've actually walked through something. We've gone through a list of I hold back on my, there's a lost opportunity and a holding back on my end. Reading from the notes. Maybe out of fear, out of selfishness, maybe protection. And then we got to establishing a new balance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I'm thinking of, there's some binary star systems. And we haven't got, our telescopes aren't big enough to see the two stars, but we can tell that something's moving around something else. So you don't have to understand the situation to know that you're compensating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So then you said if you hint at it or address it, then they might think that they're doing everything right. I'm sorry. If you try to address it, and you do address it, then they relax. It's taken care of. And then I said, what if you would lose their attention? And then I said, what if you reached over and said, hey, hey, so that you didn't lose their attention?
Mm-hmm.
And you managed to keep them engaged. So would there be a resolution there, or would something else get triggered?
Um, it just feels, I mean, if I relaxed and did all of these things I sort of think that I want to do,
Mm-hmm.
and then everyone else around me thought, oh, we must be doing great too.
Mm-hmm.
Like it, I guess it just feels unstable for me because I'm so used to operating in a certain way.
Okay.
So it's this like, it feels, it's like territory I haven't gone into. It's like, what am I going to hold on to?
Right.
So it's freeing, but it's scary
Mm-hmm.
and it feels chaotic.
Mm-hmm. So what's on the other side if you can move through these uncomfortable feelings? What's possible here?
Just, well, lots and lots of big things are possible when you think bigger. I don't know what they are, but it would be, it would seem to me very overwhelming if the possibilities, were endless.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if there was fluidity within my body and fluidity within my relationship and being a mom and handling the finances, if there was this harmony and fluidity there,
Yeah.
it sounds positive when I hear myself say it, but at the same time, I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe I feel like there's some sort of, if I will have to become more responsible or I will have to be some kind of better person if I move into this place. And I don't know if I can do that. And I don't know if I can handle this big vision or this open space or.
So let me repeat to you what I just heard with a little translation.
Okay.
It would be great but then I might be the one holding everybody back. So I think I'll just stay back here where other people are holding me back.
Okay. Right.
Mhm. What if there's some truth in that?
Right. So I'm holding back, standing in the background, saying, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong, and you're doing it wrong. But I'm not stepping into that sort of leadership role or that, adult role or mature role, because then I might be the one who's doing it wrong. Yeah.
So to some small extent, you're wanting them to take the risk of being different before you take the risk of being different.
Mhm. But everyone has a different capacity for taking risk.
That's true.
So,
I'm saying that you're asking them to take the risk of change without you also taking the risk of change.
mhm.
And what I'm trying to draw here is a little bit of a parallel, meaning when you want somebody else to change and you're not willing to change, there's an unfairness about that.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how far ahead of them you already are. Okay? Nobody's ever equal.
Mhm.
We're all in different stages of development. In this one place where you might be ahead because you have awareness, okay? You're inviting the other person to change, but you're nervous about changing.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, of course I'm nervous about that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, of course, they are too. So there's actually two parties,
Mhm.
and both parties are nervous about change.
Mhm.
Now, laugh with me.
Okay.
The person who thinks they know what to do is the only one who can really bring about change.
The only person who thinks they know what to do can bring it out.
Yes, in other words, the person with awareness that
Mhm.
something is not working and needs to be adjusted
Mhm.
is the only one who can make the adjustment. Because the other person is clueless to some degree. That makes sense?
Mhm.
So you have an awareness that you want something to change, that you're holding back, that a rebalancing might be good for everyone.
Mhm.
But you want them to do it first.
Mhm.
What's the usual response to that?
I don't need to change.
You remember there's a commercial about a cereal commercial, and they have three boys, and they're dark-haired, freckle-faced boys, obviously brothers. And the two are arguing about whether to try the new cereal, and they shove it across the breakfast table and say, "Let Mikey try it."
Uh-huh.
And the universality of that commercial is we always want somebody else to try something new first,
Mhm.
and then we'll try it.
Mhm.
And some of us are crazy or ignorant enough to do that. But the rest of us are shoving our cereal bowls to somebody else.
Mhm.
So describe to me the worst possible scenario if you try and fail. What would failure look like?
Maybe like humiliation.
Okay, but describe humiliation for me. Would your name be on the front page of the local newspaper? If we Googled you, would we get 300 entries about how crazy and stupid and foolish you were? What does humiliation actually look like?
When I'm picking my son up at school, all the moms give me a weird look.
Okay, that's great. Okay. My point was when we actually name it, it's fairly small. We feel it. It's not, I'm not saying it's unimportant.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying it's modest. The feeling is very sharp,
Mm-hmm.
but the reality is usually pretty modest.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing to endure a few snooty glances to try something new that might work?
Mm-hmm.
Keeping in mind that sometimes people give snooty glances because they just don't understand what's just happened. Snooty glances are not intelligent critiques of who you are or what you've done.
So being brave enough to endure something that's not really so bad is what you need to do to kind of get yourself out of this place that's stuck.
Mm-hmm. And here's the tricky part. Doing something new is always going to feel the same way, no matter how many times you've done it. It's always going to involve a certain risk
Mm-hmm.
to the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Because doing something new is by definition going into the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And the definition of unknown is we don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to invite you to consider how many times a day you actually do face the unknown. Do you drive?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You must face the unknown every 3 seconds while you're driving.
Mm-hmm.
You may not think of it like that. But every few seconds of driving, we have no idea who's going to come out of a driveway backwards, who's not going to see the stop sign.
Mm-hmm.
We think we know. It looks pretty orderly out there.
Mm-hmm.
So every day when you drive, you take a leap of faith.
Mm-hmm. I guess we get used to facing the unknown when we drive.
Mm-hmm. I take it that you've had some fender bender at some point in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Suddenly you can't seem to drive with any confidence for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Because the unknown is now in our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And then it fades, and our confidence rebuilds, and we don't think of it as the unknown anymore. What I'm suggesting is the same thing happens in pushing the envelope socially.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that one of the most lovely things that someone ever said about me, I was in a class, Pathwork class, and I hadn't realized I'd been with this class for about 7 years at that point. And I was doing something that for me was normal. And we had a new teacher, and she did not understand what I was doing. And one of my classmates said to the teacher, "Oh, that's just Jan. That's what she does." And I thought, for two reasons. One, I hadn't realized how relaxed I'd gotten with my classmates, that I would do things that were so normal to me that I wasn't even conscious of them. I was being me. But what really got my attention was they weren't ignoring me. They saw it and they had gotten used to it and they had accepted it and were, in a very slight way, defending me.
Mm-hmm.
The new teacher. She's not ignoring you. That's what Jan does when she's focusing. But if you had, in the beginning, when I was a child, when people said, "Now I want you to look at me, and I want you to sit up straight, and I want you to face," you know all the things they tell kids. Because that communicates to me that you are listening to me. But sometimes my way of listening was to close my eyes and duck my head, and people thought I was falling asleep. And I wasn't able to do that as a child because teachers insisted, in a group of people, on some similarity in responses. But I listen best if I close my eyes and tilt my head over. And that as adults, we want our best, not our normal. Does that make sense? And some people will look at you like you're strange. So what would it be worth if you were just doing what you felt was right and you got a few glances?
Well, I just noticed the glances, and if I knew what I was doing was right,
Mm-hmm.
just move on.
And what would the world get if you did that?
The energy of the world would be able to flow through me much better,
Mm-hmm.
and in turn help other people, and
Mm-hmm.
also create a pathway for them to be themselves.
Yes, it would. After a while, people get tired of noticing and making glances. They just give it up and move on. You could help them do that. Think for a moment about how society has changed in the last 20 years. when you walk down the street and you see people in different costumes with different hairstyles, shaved heads and mohawks and tattoos and costumes from different countries and societies and cultures and things that we would have stared at 20 years ago. And it's just normal now.
Mm-hmm.
But it took a while. And some people had to get stared at for a while before we became acclimatized to different ways of being.
And because we haven't always been able to explore
Mm-hmm.
what is ourselves, when we think we're going to go and do that, it's like, hey, wait a second. What, what am I trying to, what's really there?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
It really is a new privilege. Like having a new muscle and having to learn how it moves and how to use it and what it's good for.
Mm-hmm.
And as we explore it, we might look a little goofy.
Mm-hmm. So if we risk not holding and letting go,
Mm-hmm.
it gives other people permission to do that. Maybe that is scary because we're the ones who feel like, kind of back to what we were talking about. We feel like we're the ones who are establishing boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So without having somebody else, I mean, I don't know. If you let yourself go, you're giving other people permission to do the same. And so that is also scary when you're relying on somebody else.
Yes, that's real chaos, isn't it? But my challenge would be everybody's changing day by day, hour by hour anyway. Why not enjoy it? What I'm saying is that statement that you made supposes that not letting people change means they'll stay exactly where they are, but that's not what happens. there's a lecture called The Anatomy of Contraction. I think it's 235. And what it says is that we're either expanding or contracting, or we're in a pause.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But if we stay in that pause, it becomes stasis. And stasis turns into stagnation. And stagnation will not be tolerated by an organism. Right. Okay. Stagnation causes death. So ultimately, the organism has to do something. Mm-hmm. So people who don't change on the outside, there's still a lot of stuff going on in us inside, and we may be in contraction, actually. So my point is that we started this by saying, well, if I change, the other person will change, and boy, that's scary. But the other person is already changing. And they may be changing in a way that is hardening rather than freeing. So why not exercise the freedom muscle and get good at it?
Give it my best shot.
Pardon?
I can give it my best shot.
Well, I think that what I try to do is there's a perception that if we don't see it, it's not happening. Mm-hmm. Okay. But what I'm describing is that people are in a constant state of change.
So it seems like they might be expanding, but they may or may not be. And they may be expanding. It's like you said, driving in a car every 3 seconds, you're dealing with something different. Mm-hmm. Well, the same thing with human emotions. Mm-hmm. They're changing every 3 seconds too.
Yeah. So again, if we extend ourselves in a freeing motion, mm-hmm. and we encourage the other person to extend themselves, first of all, it's conscious, mm-hmm. instead of being unconscious, which is usually for the better. Mm-hmm. And secondly, there's feedback there. Mm-hmm. Oh, a little bit more to the left. Oh, a little bit more to the right. There's a place of feedback and camaraderie. Mm-hmm. That may be as important as the freedom itself. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So does that small section feel complete to you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you want to explore anything else or end the recording?
I think I'm ready to end.
Okay. Thank you so much for letting me record this.
Oh, you're welcome.